Welcome to Frame Forward. My name is Jason Steele, and today we're going to be talking about Film 3, a new ecosystem within the Web3 internet that is helping filmmakers to be able to fund, create, and distribute films in a whole new way. Now today, as we go through this topic, we are going to be talking a little bit about money. Don't take it as investment advice. I'm not an investment advisor, and so don't take it as that at all. But we are going to explore some of the topics and just try to get to the understanding of what some of this means. So join me as we look one frame forward into the future of Film 3. Welcome to today's episode. Again, my name is Jason Steele, and today I'm just going to share with you off the cuff some of the different things that I've been learning about this new ecosystem of Film 3 over the last, 10 months. It's fairly new, and it's based around Web3. So let's start with a few definitions. What is Web3? So the prior iterations of the internet, the internet started off as colleges, universities, and the military finding ways to be able to send information back and forth and connect to each other. Eventually, average people began to be able to connect into the internet, which became the early Web 1 internet. And it had really boring web pages. You couldn't really do a whole lot with it, but you could put up a web page that it maybe showed something that you had for sale, or that you had a plumbing business, or whatever. Then we move on to Web 2, which is the social internet. This is the Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, anywhere where I am putting up my content. I'm sharing a little bit. And then it's sitting there. People can find it and access it, and they can look at it. But it's all centralized in these ecosystems. Facebook owns everything that's on Facebook. YouTube owns everything that's on YouTube, right? And so we are giving our content to other people. There are other organizations. They are they're selling advertising space. They're making money through advertising, but we're putting ourselves into somebody else's ecosystem to create so that they can run it as a business. Web3 is decentralized. So Web3, instead of being centralized with these organizations that own everything, it is spreading it back out to the people. So I'm creating my spaces where people can find me. So it's also going to be heavily virtual reality. So I'm going to be able to put on a headset. I'm going to be able to create a virtual version of my house if I want my friends to come over to a virtual version of my house. Or I could create a tree house, or whatever I want. I could create a jungle-scape and live out in the jungle, and people could come out, and I can invite friends to come hang out with me in my tree fort. And we're all going to put on our virtual headsets, each be in our own real bricks and mortar homes all over the world, but we can all kind of come together in our little tree fort and hang out. This will also allow collaboration for live interactive things. For example, an improv group. For example, instead of having to pay rent for a theater space, an improv group will be able to, in the Web3 world, be able to create a virtual theater space, which really costs them no money. They don't have to pay any rent in a virtual theater space. Then they can invite people to come watch a show and pay for tickets in a virtual theater space. They could still put on a great performance, a great improv performance, but it's all virtual. They don't have the costs of that theater space anymore, which is huge for live theater. That's just one example of how the metaverse, which is what Web3 is all about, is about metaverse, about interacting in a physically interactive space that nobody owns, that people can access from anywhere. I own my space. I own everything in my space. Whereas in the Web 2 world, everything is owned by people, by organizations in Web 2. Right? If I play a video game in Web 2, I buy a new gun in the video game or a new skin in the video game. If I ever leave that video game, it's all on their server. If their server goes down and is corrupted, and my account is lost, all that stuff is lost. I don't own any of it. I've paid for it. I can use it, but if that service ever goes down, it's gone. Web3, I own everything. I have a wallet that contains all of those digital items. If somebody creates another game that can use the same items, I can take those items, move over to a different digital game, and install them on that character and play in there. We'll be able to have our own digital skins within Web3 as well. As we're walking around in the metaverse, I could walk around as a bear, or walk around as Luke Skywalker. I can create a digital version of myself that looks like anything. So that's kind of the gist of Web3 and what it looks like. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the things that fit with film. So making a film in the old world, you created a film, you sent it out to theaters, the theaters put it up on their screen, and let's just look at how distribution changed. So it used to be that you would put your film up onto a theater screen, and 6 months later you would release the DVD. But then streaming came out, as well as more digital piracy, and it became, they began to lose a lot more and more people by having those long release times, because more and more people would pirate it, and they would actually have to have two different, they'd have to market it during the initial release and market it again for the DVD release. So they're paying marketing budgets twice for this film to try and sell it twice. And so they began to compress those release times and closer and closer. So now there are films that are released simultaneously in the theater and in streaming. They hardly even touch DVD anymore. DVD and Blu-rays, they still get made, but I don't know how many are actually being sold, because so much is going right into streaming. So for theaters that have films, they're getting their film, and it's instead of having it, and if it's really popular, having it like sometimes hang on for 3 months. Years ago, some movies would hang on for 3 months in theaters. But now, it's weeks, sometimes 1 week, sometimes it's a few weeks, but very rare is a film in a theater for more than a month anymore, because they want to just have one marketing cycle. They pay $50 million to market this movie, and now that one bit of marketing is going to hit the theater crowd, but it's still going to be fresh in people's minds as streaming is released. So they can do one expensive marketing push instead of a marketing push now, a marketing push later with DVD, another marketing push with streaming. It's one marketing push, so they're saving their marketing money. But what's happening now is that those movies are going out of theaters really quick, because people know, well, I can watch it on streaming in a couple of weeks. So why go to the theater? So some people might go to the theater because they're really excited, or they want to see it on the big screen, but they're going to go in the first couple of weeks, because after that, oh, there it is. It's on the streaming platform. So now theaters are suddenly in this spot where, and we started to see it during the pandemic, where theaters, of course, there wasn't as much content being created because film crews couldn't get together to film content. So there was a shortage of content. Now, filmmaking has ramped right back up to full tilt, and they're creating content, but they're not creating enough content to be releasing content every couple of weeks yet. The content creation cycle of, hey, sometimes the movies can stay in a theater for 3 months, that's done, right? So if they're having to replace movies every couple of weeks on that screen, that means they're going to need fresh content all the time. And something that I actually have seen a couple of times recently here in Alberta are independent movies getting into the big theaters for a 1 or 2 week release cycle, which was unheard of. You never saw independent movies getting into the mainstream theaters. You could see them get into the independent theaters, but the mainstreams, that wasn't a thing. And I have seen that very recently in Alberta a couple of times, which makes me think that they are still short on content and they are open to the idea of having these independent movies presented on their screens. That's not really connected to Film 3, but it kind of tells the tale of where our ecosystem's going. When it comes to purchasing a ticket to a movie, our current system, let's say I create a movie, I go and I try to find a distributor or sales agent. That distributor or sales agent then sells it to theaters, sells it to streaming, sells it to different markets. Now, when somebody buys a ticket at the theater, that ticket, literally on the moment that they purchase the ticket, let's say it goes through my bank account, my bank holds a certain portion of money aside and says, okay, yeah, we're going to put that into your account. It doesn't happen automatically, though. If you've ever looked at your bank statements or your credit card statements, it's not instantaneous. There is a little bit of a delay as they settle the transaction of funds. Sometimes it can be a day or two later that it actually shows up on your credit card bill. But they block the money so that you can't use it, obviously, while it's in that transaction flow. But the stuff that's going on behind the scenes takes a little longer. So the bank has the money, or the bank says, yep, this $10 has been paid for this ticket. The theater now, as they get to the end of the week, they look at how many tickets they've sold. They say, okay, this is how much money we're keeping. This is our percentage, and this is the percentage going to the distributor. They send that along to the distributor. Distributor keeps their percentage and theoretically passes it down to the filmmaker, who then passes it down to whoever else has a stake in it. But for the big tentpole movies, they've got great distributors, they've got great systems, and they're able to track things really well, and it goes great because they've got really solid, strong connections. For us independent guys, we can't really get those big distributors. It's really hard for us to get there. So we go to film festivals to try to find a big distributor, and a lot of independent filmmakers get preyed upon by sharks, distributors who maybe don't have their best interests in mind. And so now, if they get it into a theater, they get it into whatever streaming or VOD, if I ask that distributor, hey, how are my sales going? They'll say, we'll send you a little thing every 3 months telling you how your movie's doing. And even when I get that, it's might be confusing to read. I might need to ask somebody, what on earth does any of this mean? And the amount of money in these bad distribution deals can be kind of low. So maybe we've sold 1,000 copies, but the distributor has, created some new marketing materials or done some kind of a campaign, and they've eaten up all of our potential profits in just trying to build the distribution and get it out more. And so, so we're not seeing any of that profit. But to try and track every penny and figure out where are they taking more than they should, we can't really track that. So we kind of are stuck. What's interesting is that this new Film 3 world, we're going to get into this, has a way for us to be able to track every penny and have it paid instantly. Because that system, from the bank through the theater, through to the distributor, through to the filmmaker, and eventually to the royalties to the creators who are being paid royalties at the other end, could be several months to get through those steps in the chain in the old way of doing things. But it's instantaneous in the Film 3 system, which I think is really interesting. So how does it happen instantaneously in the Film 3 world? It's a digital currency. So, and everything's digital currency now. Let's just be honest, right? We still can get cash, but most of the time we're using our debit or credit cards now. We're using digital transactions. Unfortunately, the digital transactions through the banks are a little slower and don't happen instantaneously, and it goes from one account to the next, and then they do all of their behind the scenes stuff, and then it goes to the next person's account. They do all their behind the scenes stuff, and they pay it to the next person. It takes a while to go through that process. But what's interesting with cryptocurrency and that some of the newer digital currencies that are not connected to the old countries' banking systems is they're decentralized, which means if that bank goes down and my money just gets taken away, or there's a run on the banks and that bank and I can't get my money out because there just isn't money there, I'm out of luck. But with a decentralized money system, I have my wallet. All of my money is in a wallet account that I have. At any time, I can simply enter a certain code on any computer anywhere and access my wallet. It's not in a bank. It's not in somewhere that can't be accessed. All the transactions are recorded on something called blockchain, which in the old way, every transaction would be recorded at the bank, and then transactions from the bank to the bank of the theater are recorded at that bank. Then there's another transaction from the theater down to the distributor's bank, and then that transaction. But I can't see any of that. I can't track that. But in the new world of blockchain, every transaction is recorded in one digital file. That digital file is shared around to thousands of people instantly. And so they all have a copy of the file. The moment that these new transactions are coded into that blockchain, that new file is distributed to those thousands of people again. So every few seconds, there's a new record of every transaction that's ever existed. And so if one person changes, goes in and somehow hacks that file and changes it, the system basically says, okay, there's 999 copies that show this transaction record, and there's only one that shows that one. So that one has to be fake. And it immediately discounts that as a not real one. And so 1,000 people, as an example, have the right record. One person has the wrong one. That wrong one gets discarded. So it's impossible to hack unless you have more than 51% of all of the computers that have a copy of it under your control. Every transaction happens instantly. So when I buy a ticket at a theater that uses blockchain digital currency, that ticket sale goes straight to instantly goes through the wallet of the theater chain. The theater chain has a smart contract that says this is what happens when this ticket's purchased for this movie. It's say 50% for the chain, 50% for the to go down to the distributor. Instantly, the distributor's wallet has a smart contract that says how much is going which directions, and it sends it down to the filmmaker, their percentage, the filmmaker has a smart contract that tells how it's going to distribute, and it all happens instantly. In one transaction, that $10 movie ticket gets spread to everybody who has a piece in it. You don't have to wait months, it's seconds. And anybody at any time can search the blockchain to see every transaction that has occurred in relation to that film, or everything that occurred with that one transaction, or everything that has been transacted by that distributor or by that theater. You can check you can check all the pieces of the chain and figure out where things are happening. This means that the theater company doesn't have to create a back end list of how many tickets they've sold, because anybody, the distributor, the filmmaker, the the Grip, who got a 1% cut. Everybody can just do a quick search on the blockchain and generate their own report about how many tickets were sold. The distributor doesn't have to do all that back-end work of tracking down where all these tickets were sold and how many they have to sell and how much they have to send down. It's instant, and everybody else can see it. They don't need to ask for that report because it's easily accessible. Everywhere along the way can access it, cutting down on the behind-the-scenes costs. Let's talk about the funding of projects. Currently, we can go get grants, we can get a crowdfunding campaign, but crowdfunding in the Web3 world or Film 3 world is a little different. We're creating digital products that have a limited release. So like a limited release artwork or something like that, where it's a collectible. People can now see there's a limited number of these collectibles that could be a digital picture, could be a digital film clip, could be a digital audio clip. There's a limited number, and they can see this is one of 10 or 1 in 100 or 1 of 1,000 of this particular clip or picture or whatever. And so if they're a collector and they want to be a part of your project and they're like, hey, I think this project's really cool. I want to buy a collectible and help to fund it. They may spend even hundreds of dollars to buy a digital collectible, knowing that they can share it and show it off to all their friends that, hey, you know what? Like, I got in on this movie early and you want proof? I bought this collectible before anybody knew this movie existed or was going to exist. And, they can show it off and potentially sell it. If the movie really hits and people are really excited about it, they may be able to resell that collectible at a profit, which is kind of cool. So, but it doesn't have a cost, like it costs way less to create a digital collectible than it would be to do, say, a t-shirt in a campaign where now you have to print and ship that t-shirt to all of your funders who bought at the t-shirt level. A digital collectible, it's just, popping in their wallet address and clicking mint, and it mints their digital collectible. But it's all proven on the blockchain that who owns it, how many copies there are, and there are other ways of funding. You could perhaps pre-sell copies of your film. So again, you could create a digital copy, a limited edition digital copy of your film. So maybe you make 10,000 copies. Let's say, for example, you could go to a YouTuber and say, hey, I need a budget of $10,000 to make this film that I want to make. And I'd like to sell it to you for $1 a copy. And when the movie comes out, you can resell those copies for $10 a copy and make a profit. That's way more fun to sell than the types of things that YouTubers use for their promotional stuff right now. Like right now, it's like, hey, do you want to design a website? Here's a website design tool. Or, hey, do you want to learn some really cool things? Here's a place where you can do digital online learning and learn about stuff. Do you want to get food delivered to your door? Here's a place where you can get food delivered to your door. They get an affiliate commission for doing those types of promotions. Why not sell a movie and make a promotion? That's a way more fun thing to sell. So you could pre-sell 10,000 copies to a YouTuber and say, hey, $10,000, you get 10,000 copies. When the movie's released, you're going to be able to sell it for $10 a copy. Great. They're going to make 10 times their money. The other cool thing is that you can attach a royalty to these limited edition digital pieces, right? So if you make your film have a 20% royalty, every time that movie gets resold, you take 20% of whatever it was resold for. So let's say that YouTuber sells their 10,000 copies, and maybe you even have that royalty right away. So they paid $1 to purchase it initially, but then when they sell it for $10, a $2 royalty comes off and comes back to you. So now you're getting $20,000 on release day for all the copies they're selling. But they're still making 6 times their money. They're buying it for $1 and they're selling it for 10 and really only keeping 8. So it's like, I don't know, 7 times their money or something. They're making a good profit. But then when somebody resells it, you're making 20% on every resale. Unlike the old way where you buy a DVD and maybe for $20, you go to a pawn shop and sell it for $2, and then maybe somebody buys it at the pawn shop for $5, and then they garage sale it for 50 cents, and then somebody donates it to a thrift shop, and then it gets resold by the thrift shop for $2. Every one of those aftermarket transactions generates nothing for the filmmaker, right? But a lot of people are seeing the movie. Whereas with digital, you can add a royalty every time that copy is resold. And if it's a limited edition, then people will have to buy it from other people. And if it's really limited and you're becoming popular and people want to pay a premium price for your thing, like let's say your first movie you sell 500 copies and you make that the limit, but 5 years later you make a movie that makes $50 million, when people are looking for other movies you've made and they find that one that there's 500 copies, that's extremely limited. There are going to be some collectors who say, you know what, I'm willing to pay $100 or $1,000 or I don't know, $5,000 for a copy of this because I like this person's work and I want to see more and I'm willing to pay for it. And I know that this is a limited edition, so I'll pay extra like a collector because you are a collector. That's kind of interesting. And if, let's say they pay $1,000 and you're making a 20% royalty, that's $200, right? So it's kind of a cool thing, the way that money can work in this new ecosystem. These digital collectibles are something that is called NFT, non-fungible token. That's a technical term for it, but basically think of it as a digital collectible, limited edition collectible version of something. Filmmakers are selling screenshot frames from their thing or little pictures of some of the characters, maybe artwork of some of the characters, and they're turning those into limited edition artworks, pre-selling those and using that money to fund their things. I don't know if anybody's pre-selling the actual film itself. Similar to like an Indiegogo where, you pay $10, you will get a copy when it's done. They're doing it that way. I don't know if people are buying it at a low price and selling it at a high price like that, selling a YouTuber copies for $1, so, having them sell it for 10. Again, this isn't investment advice. I don't know for sure if that would fly. It makes sense in my head, but who knows? But that's a way that you can use these limited edition digital copies in order to do something like this. And so those are kind of some interesting things. You could also have maybe your soundtrack from your film. You could have a limited edition of a song that was maybe custom made for your film. You could have a limited release of that and sell that as one of these limited edition collectibles. And so all of these pieces can help to fund your movie. They can be collectibles that people could buy after the movie is released as well. Maybe when it's if it's really awesome, you might make some more money on it there if you haven't sold out your limited edition run at the beginning. You can also use these non-fungible tokens as well as a proof of when something occurred, which is really interesting. Again, like I mentioned, that blockchain is an immutable ledger of transactions. So in that blockchain, if I write a script and I mint an NFT, a non-fungible token, with that script, that is registered on that blockchain, that ledger, and it will show the exact moment, the date that was minted. So if anybody comes and says, hey, that's my script, I created that script, but they can't show that they had it created before, you've got an immutable date there. Again, not legal advice. Should probably still copyright it and everything in all the usual fashions. However, there may become a day soon when that immutable blockchain ledger technology is going to be the way in order to prove the date that something was created. So I think that that's probably where it's going. I don't know for sure. Again, not legal advice. Intellectual property rights as well. People are doing interesting things where, let's say, they've created let's say you've created a movie, or you're creating a movie. You do those digital collectibles of pictures of the different characters. You could sell those digital collectibles as just something that that person can own. They can look at. They can use that picture as their profile picture on a social media channel if they think it's a really cool picture and it's like, that makes me look pretty cool. They can use that as that. You could also sell them some of the intellectual property rights. You could sell them the rights to be able to turn that character into a derivative work, right? Like turn it into their own cartoon or their own movie, or create a cartoon out of it, a comic book. They could turn it into a meme, put a mustache on it and a funny phrase or whatever. You could choose to not give them those derivative rights, or you could choose to sell them those derivative rights with it, which may increase the value that you can sell those limited edition things for as well, and improve your budget. So interesting things that are being done in this Film 3 space. The other thing people are doing now in Film 3 is creating as communities. So just as we do in the regular bricks and mortar world, we bring together, filmmakers, actors, writer, animators, and things like that. In the real world, they're bringing people together worldwide online to create these sorts of things. So that they can create the stories in the background and have that intellectual property rights shared between all the different creatives that are involved in that. And then escalating some of those storylines and concepts to filmmakers, to animators, to be able to create animated projects. And sharing into the intellectual property rights and the proper profits from those, which I think is really interesting as well. We talked a little bit in the virtual reality episode, and I encourage you to look that up to see more about how virtual reality will be used. But just to give a quick basic idea, the metaverse, which is where Web3 is really going to be based, is all virtual reality. And so films made in that space, it's going to be hard to make films that are filmed from one direction. That's kind of going to be the old way of doing things. We're going to start to see more digitally live rendered films. So it may have more deepfake technology so that characters can be seen from any direction. They can be rendered from any direction. And we're going to see more of that sort of thing. And stories where people are interacting live. So there's going to be live actors in there. They're going to viewers are going to be able to walk around those live actors. They might be able to interact, kind of in an improv style. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that sort of thing. But take a look at the virtual reality episode to see more about how those types of technologies are going to change as we look at Film 3. Overall, I think that gives you a quick rundown on what Film 3 is, what the metaverse is. There's a lot more details that you could dive into and find out what projects have been launched already using Film 3 systems, what sorts of projects are on the horizon, what sorts of tools are available, what sorts of tools might be coming up. And you can begin your own journey to see if Film 3 might be an ecosystem that you want to work on some of your future projects in. Again, throughout this episode, we've talked a few numbers and things like that. Again, don't take that as financial advice. I am not a financial advisor, and some of these are things that are in existence and have been done. Some of these ideas are not things that are in existence and haven't been done yet, but the tools exist that it should be doable. And so therefore I present it as concepts and ideas. But if you want to learn more and find some more resources, you can go to our website at frameforwardshow.com. There's lots of, we're going to put links there of places that you can go to find out more about Film 3 and what's happening in that space. As well, go to any social media platform and just search for hashtag Film 3. And you'll probably stumble across a lot of the activity that's going on in that space as well, and begin to dive into the learning journey. So again, my name is Jason Steele, and thank you for joining me. And until next time, when we move one frame forward into the future of film.